Hey, Nicole Huntsman from moderncosmic.com. Today we're going to continue our series of synastry house overlays. We're moving on out to our outer planets, so we'll start today with Uranus, discovered during the scientific revolution around 1781. It's actually seen earlier than that by other astronomers, but Sir William Herschel's the one who's been attributed as the actual discoverer of Uranus. Now this planet, because it was discovered during a time where we were having all these advances in chemistry, mathematics, physics, astronomy, etc., etc. This is the scientific revolution. This is a time when our old sort of mode and our old way of thinking was changing, and we were moving into what we would consider, now the modern world. Now, with Uranus, this is a planet that if you even just look at the planet itself, it spins, or rotates rather, on an axis that's kind of on its side. It doesn't rotate like the rest of the planets as it's orbiting the sun. So it was discovered at a time unexpectedly, where we were sort of on the verge of all these breakthroughs, but it's also just kind of this oddball. It's different than the rest of the planets, the rest of the known planets in our solar system. Uranus, from mythology, was the son of Gaia and also the husband of Gaia. He was the sky god, she's Mother Earth, and so there's kind of an interesting dynamic there, marrying your mother, and that also is something that we sort of attribute to Uranus. It's this non-conventional way of being, okay? So you might ask, what does this have to do with synastry? Okay. When you look at a synastry chart, or when you look at a composite chart or a Davison chart between two people, if there are a lot of Uranian markers or Uranian contacts, this tells you that this is a relationship that has a particular feel, okay? You can have a relationship that's a Plutonian one, a Uranian one, a Saturnian one. If they have repeated markers of Uranian contacts between the two people, we know the following things. I'm going to give you some keywords here. These will sort of characterize the relationship, okay? So I've got a little list of keywords, so don't forget any. Of course, nonconformity, instability, the unexpected. The relationship can feel electrical or exciting, okay? Radical change, so this could be someone who comes into your life. Look at where that Uranus falls and what contacts it makes to your luminaries and your personal planets. It will show you how this person has sort of disrupted your life in a way and forced you to look at your life with a new, fresh perspective. This can also be a relationship that has a high element of maybe trying things you've never tried before. So there's sort of a freak flag element to Uranus. Non-attachment. Uranus is a very, the way it lands in charts, it lends a highly non-emotional kind of quality to the relationship. There's a platonic thing happening, but there is a sort of a detachment from emotion when you look at Uranus contacts. It's like the person you could have as it could be a relationship that's sort of a lover relationship without the emotional connection. So also you've got instability, like I said earlier, disruption, there's unconventionality, and there can be insecurity with this type of a relationship. If you have somebody who has a high need for predictability, or they need to feel like their partner is committed to them, if they're in a relationship that's got a lot of Uranus in it, it's almost as though it's almost impossible to make that relationship stable, to make it have a conventional sort of committed foundation to it. So Uranus, it can be challenging. Some people, though, if you've got someone who has a lot of Aquarius or a lot of perhaps Sun conjunct Uranus in their birth chart, they're built that way, and there's somebody who already has an on-again, off-again quality, an unconventional, sort of unpredictable nature to the way that they're built, they may be attracted to a relationship like that, okay? If you're someone whose Uranus is unaspected in your birth chart, and someone comes along and their Uranus is making aspects to your sun and your moon, let's say, or something, right? It's going to be exciting. It's going to sort of knock you off your feet a little bit, and you can be a crazy maker is what I'm trying to say. So Uranus can be good, it can be exciting, but it can also make you feel a little crazy and cuckoo birds. Ultimately, in the end, the whole idea with Uranian contacts and Uranian relationships is to help you break your old way of thinking and introduce you to a new version of what relationship is, sort of a transcendent version, a cosmic version, like we're all one, what is love, helps you to ask these really big questions, all right? So let's go through each of the houses, and let's see how your Uranus, where it falls into your partner's chart, how it is that you're bringing about sort of unexpected, exciting change and introducing your partner to new ways of thinking that maybe they haven't looked at before. Okay, so it's really important to note with these outer planets, remember, because people who are of the same age as you and have the same age as your partner, they're going to, so let's say, for example, you've got a partner, and let's say your partner is with you and is maybe dating someone else, and you and this other person are around the same age within a couple of years or so. There's a very good chance that both of your Uranuses fall in the same house for your partner. Okay, so also it's important to know that in your birth chart, the people that are around your same age are going to have a certain influence on you. So if you're someone like, for example, I have my Uranus in the third house, so most people's Uranus that are around my same age fall into my third house as well. So it's interesting, as a child, I've always been very interested in science. I've always loved to learn and to read, and to cover a lot of different topics. So I've been very curious, which is quite Uranian. If you apply Uranus to the third house, that's in a natal chart, that makes perfect sense. Other people's influences on me, the people who I was most interested in being around as a kid, were always those who were sort of Uranian, kind of weird, eccentric, like science. I was in the gifted program as a child, and the kind of, those are the people I was friends with, kind of the weirdos, okay? Now, if you're someone who has Uranus, like, let's say in the fourth house, so maybe your childhood was one that had a lot of unexpected experiences and you never really felt emotionally safe, and the way you interacted with other people growing up even people your same age would have further sort of enhanced that experience of what emotional security looked like. A lot of people that came and went in your life, and a sense that you weren't always emotionally secure. So remember that overall, these outer planets shape the way you're built, because it's not only in your birth chart, but it's also all these people that you interact with that are around the same age as yours. They're going to repeat that theme, because their Uranus will also fall in that same position or thereabouts in that same house. Okay, so and you need to really have a wider a gap in age for there to have their Uranus in some totally different house. Okay, so just bear that in mind. That's why the inner aspects are really important to those personal planets. Okay, luminaries, sun, moon, the angles, and then Mercury, Venus, Mars. Okay, now those are really important. We'll talk about those in another video, but this should overall just give you sort of a flavor for how these inner aspects with the house overlays with Uranus are affecting you. Okay. If your Uranus falls into your partner's first house, this is your partner's house of their identity. So you are going to bring out in them sort of a new way of looking at themselves. You may help them fly their inner freak flag. You may help them try things they've never tried before, or simply help them sort of break away from old patterns, old habits that they've been stuck or blocked with. Issues of conformity, you may introduce to them non-conformity, non-conventionality, how to do things in a way that's sort of new and unique. Now, the problem if your Uranus falls into your partner's first house is many times, especially if it's conjunct the ascendant, many times you may meet each other sort of unexpectedly or just out of the blue, and just as quickly the relationship can just kind of disappear. So it's obviously, you got to look at the whole charts, but there's something about the quality of this interaction where it's sort of like you've come into their life for a moment to teach them something they've needed to learn, and then many times the relationship is over kind of quickly. Of course, look at everything else in the charts. If you've got a nice strong Saturn in there, and look at look at the composites and the Davison charts to get more of a picture. But this can indicate a quality that's sort of unstable or impermanent. That's just what Uranus does, and especially in the angular houses, the 1st, 4th, 7th, and 10th. Alrighty, so you've got your Uranus in your partner's 2nd house. This is your partner's house of money, possessions, what they value, security. Uranus is very different. Uranus is not really about security. Uranus is about the opposite. Uranus is about security is knowing what to expect and having some kind of a foundation and feeling safe knowing what to expect. Uranus is about taking that thing and breaking it and starting over, all right? If your Uranus falls into your partner's 2nd house, there's a good chance that you're going to have some sort of an effect on their approach to their security, typically their financial security. So whether it's that you encourage them to take risks that they shouldn't take and they end up losing money, or whether it can bring about some sort of instability or loss in your partner's either their actual finances, or there's something about the relationship that shakes up their inner sense of safety and security, self-worth, which makes them then have to ask some important questions. What am I basing my self-worth on? Is it on my partner? Or is it on, see, Uranus teaches these lessons of detachment, like that ultimately you should be fine without a partner, but having a partner enhances life. So that's the type of lessons they'll learn through you. Now, if Uranus is poorly afflicted in sort of the inner aspects between the two of you, there could be issues of you, hopefully you're not going to do this to your partner, but there can be issues where you affect their finances. You affect, it's like their finances go somewhere. There's a crazy making effect that directly affects their financial situation. So not a great place to have your financial advisor's Uranus falling in your chart. Or if you're a financial advisor, hopefully you don't have your Uranus in your client's second chart, because that's going to bring about the opposite of what a financial advisor is supposed to bring about. You're supposed to bring out security. It kind of brings the opposite. It brings insecurity relative to finances and personal self-worth. So Uranus in the third house. So if your Uranus falls in your partner's third house, you are going to introduce them to new ways of thinking about the world around them. All right. I have this in my birth chart. This is where my Uranus falls, which Uranus also rules astrology. So no wonder why I love astrology. But okay, the way that you think, the way that you look at this world is different from your partner. Okay, there's going to be an enhancement of sort of fringe thinking, or thinking in a way that's unconventional, nonconformist. Conversations between the two of you will be very electric. There's a high degree of like mental rapport when Uranus falls into a partner's third house, because you're activating and electrifying the part of their chart that has to do with their mind. And so naturally the conversations that follow will be ones that are pretty exciting. So if you've got a partner who is someone who already thinks this way, who already enjoys thinking outside the box, then this can be very compatible. If you don't, if you have a partner who likes to just sort of keep things according to the status quo, and it makes them uncomfortable to think outside of the box, then it's going to be not such a compatible aspect, not such a compatible house overlay. With Uranus, remember, there is an element of crazy making that happens with Uranus. So when you put it into the third house, it could, especially if it's aspected in a way that's negative, your partner, so if this is your Uranus in your partner's house, the house person may think that you think in a way that's a little abnormal or odd or weird, or the conversations could simply take on sort of an abnormal, odd, weird flavor. Okay, but there's definitely a high degree of mental expression and mental sort of boundary pushing in this inter-aspect. But overall with this, I would say, if your Uranus falls in your partner's third house, you excite them. You excite the way that their mind works. This is someone who has a high need for Mercury activation, because Uranus is kind of like a higher octave of Mercury. It's a mental planet. I think of it as a sort of the cosmic mind. It's wanting to dive into those big questions of how the universe works. It's very mathematical. It's like sacred geometry is what I think of when I think of Uranus. So you are bringing out this sort of interaction with your partner. If you've got someone who needs a high degree of mental stimulation, this is a very nice interaspect to have. Otherwise, it can make your partner feel a little bit, if they're someone who just likes to kind of keep their thinking on the straight and narrow, they will feel a little bit, they could just think you think in a way that's very weird, or that you're making them feel a little uncomfortable because you're pushing the boundaries of what it is that they want to be thinking about and talking about and discussing. You're a little too fringe, a little too unconventional, the things you say are a little too unexpected and unpredictable and crazy, right? So depends on the birth charts between the two people. If your Uranus falls in your partner's fourth house is our house of home. It is the bottom, it's the bottom of the birth chart. It's that place of safety and security. Uranus is about disrupting. And if your Uranus is falling in your partner's fourth house, many times it's an angular house as well, so it's an important part of our identity. You could sort of shake up and this person's sense of security and safety, their emotional sense of security and safety. It could initially be very exciting, but this ultimately is going to feel unsafe in a sense. Like emotionally, there's always this high level of not sure, being unpredictable, not knowing what to rely on in this interaction. There can also be this sense that you're wanting to change their home life or help this person be free of the things they grew up learning. But at the same time, this can feel to the house person unsettling and it can feel like it's sort of a challenge to their personal safety and security, especially if they're not ready to let go of things that you think that they should be letting go of and moving on from. Okay, so for example, let's say you meet someone and you guys are through work, all right? And with the job that you have, maybe you're in the military or overseas, okay? So you're in a situation where when you come together, your living arrangement, your literal living circumstances are sort of up in the air. So that quality is also a part of the interaction between the two of you, if that makes any sense. So Uranus in the fourth house is just, it's going to bring about, you are going to cause your partner to change the way that they look at home security, like emotional security in particular, and even their childhood, how they were raised, the things they were raised with, the things they were taught as a child, relative to their safety and security. You're going to sort of shake those things up and, you know, bring out the crazy a little bit. And so can be a difficult one. You just have to be sure that you're not pressing this person too much to change their emotional bedrock to fit whatever it is that you think it should fit. All right, if your Uranus falls into your partner's fifth house is the house of creativity, it's the house of children, it's the house of lovemaking or the lovers. This is also the house of self-expression. So it's our Leo house, it's the sun, the house of the sun. Uranus in the fifth house, this is one where it can be great for inspiring originality and creative output for your partner. Okay, you may bring out in them sort of new ways of approaching problem solving, or if they're a creative person, new ways of innovating. So this can be great. It can add sparkle and excitement to also their sense of self-expression. They can feel like, oh, you help me see things in this new way, and I'm going to approach this from this new direction, which can be really exciting. Also, it's the house of the lovers. So this can be, there's a suggestion here, if someone's Uranus falls, or if your Uranus falls in your partner's fifth house, that they see you as a lover that could possibly be transitory. You know, it could be sort of, you're here today, gone tomorrow kind of a thing. It's this sort of temporary relationship that's here to teach us about freedom through our relationships that can be of a romantic and sexual nature. There definitely is a high degree of physical attraction when you put Uranus in the fifth house. Does not necessarily mean, though, that that physical attraction is going to lead to like a long-term relationship, especially if, look at that Uranus. Does it contact, does it conjunct other planets or points in the chart and the synastry? Look at both partners' Uranuses, and see what contacts are happening. If you've got a lot of Uranus contacts happening, that means this relationship is about learning about an unconventional relationship, which means it can be unpredictable, it can be a little crazy making, and it can be one that's not necessarily meant for the long term, but it's meant to sort of step you into this world of the detached relationship that's here to serve a purpose, and then maybe it's time to move on, all right? So this can be very fun and exciting, quite a sexy placement, but not necessarily one that's meant for long-term relating. All right, Uranus in the sixth house. Sixth house is our Virgo house, ruled by Mercury. I like to think of the sixth house as the house of technique. It's the house of chores and homework and service. But like when you think about doing your homework, or you think about chores, or even exercise and health habits, that's part of sixth house. These all have to do with technique, how you're doing something, okay? Virgo is really interested in technique and learning the right way to do something, the right name to call something, you know, and how to apply that and how to organize with that. If your Uranus falls in your partner's sixth house, there's a good chance you are shaking up the way that they do things on a day-to-day basis. Okay, you could be shaking up their day-to-day life, making it a little bit more unpredictable, their daily routine, but you also might be introducing some new ways for them to look at how to run their day-to-day life. Maybe they're stuck in a rut. You come along and you're able to just sort of like, okay, we should, why don't you drive this way to get to the store? Or why don't you, it makes me actually think of a few different movies, you know, where you have kind of a zany girl that comes into this guy's life, this sort of shy guy that just always does things the same way. The zany girl comes along, like Along Came Polly, right? That's a great example of Uranus in the sixth house, kind of a relationship. She comes along and she introduces this guy who likes his habits, he likes to know what to expect, and she sort of shakes all that up. And it makes him a little bit crazy, but at the same time, he sort of needs it, and he doesn't know how to get out of the rut by himself. So this Uranian person comes along, she's able to help him break free of his own fears and his own habits. Okay, so that's kind of Uranus in the sixth house. It could also be something where maybe you bring, the sixth house is exercise and health habits. Uranus does rule the unconventional or the fringe. So perhaps you introduce this person to sort of new ways or new agey ways of exercising or eating. Maybe, like I was saying earlier, like eating in a way that's different from the way that this person grew up. So maybe you introduce vegan food to this person, or you introduce supplements, or you introduce yoga, or you're introducing something into their day-to-day habits that's changing and revolutionizing. It's changing for the better. It's moving this person hopefully for the better. It can just be shaking things up, but ultimately that also causes someone to have to look at these things in order to change them for the better. It's like you're forcing someone to take some action just by the way you are, but relative to their daily habits, the way they do things, their technique, their health, and also just the way that they serve other people. You also could have someone, maybe your partner is someone who is too giving and too self-sacrificing, and you come along and you're like, screw that, you need to go, you've been helping this person and you need to make some boundaries for yourself and move on. And so you could teach them detachment as well. If they've got codependent issues, things like that, you might come along and be able to help them break free from those habits that are not healthy and that are not serving them anymore. If your Uranus falls into your partner's 7th house, this is their house of relationship and partnership and the other. This you see, especially if it's this conjunct the descendant, this is a tough interaspect as far as to keep this relationship committed, solid, like, one that's you're going to be together forever and ever, okay? Because there's an element to this relating that has to do with understanding that relationships aren't necessarily meant to be permanent, that some relationships are meant to be transitory, and those have just as much value as longer-term relationships, all right? There's a good chance, too, it's possible that your Uranus falling into your partner's house of relationship, they could be in a relationship. This Uranus could come along and then break up their relationship, okay, you being the Uranus person. If they're not in a relationship, you're going to change the way this person approaches relationship, okay? This could even be something where you want a committed relationship with your partner, but because Uranus affects them, your Uranus affects them in such a way that you're activating this need for freedom from coupling, okay? Or creating some kind of coupling that is doing it its own non-conventional, again, non-conformist way, which could be being together but not living together, or being together but being with other people, or these kinds of things. You're going to affect your partner's approach to relating, and even if you want a commitment, and perhaps there's someone who wants a commitment too, the way that you guys act, or the way that you affect one another is such that it's kind of hard to keep the relationship stable and committed and solid. With Uranus in the 7th house as well, just like with the 1st house and the 4th house and the 10th house really, there can be this sort of, you arrive suddenly into the house person's life and then all of a sudden sort of are gone, okay? There's this element of you came along at a certain point in their life, disrupted things, you're like a disruptor relative to their approach to identity and relationships. You sort of disrupted the way that they look at these things, taught them what they needed to learn, and then rolled along, okay? And I don't mean to be, negative. There's a very good chance you could make this work, but you've got to look at the rest of the chart. If there are a bunch of especially conjunctions between Uranus, between the two charts, this relationship is meant to teach you about Uranian influences. Uranian influences are very, very difficult to maintain for the long haul. That's not what they're about. They're about learning about those quick, passionate, electric, exciting relationships that are not committed relationships. They are the short-term, like one-night stand, or the lover relationship, it's open relationship, or the one where you bring crazy into each other's lives. And then, some of us who like to feel safe and secure, we need these relationships in order to get to a place of even further security, right? Like, oh, well, I survived that. So if I can survive that, it makes you that much stronger, okay? So that is an element of a strongly Uranian relationship. Your Uranus falls into your partner's 8th house. This is a very transformative house overlay. So be prepared, if this is in your relationship, for a pretty intense wild ride, especially for the house person, especially for you. This person is going to come along and completely revolutionize and shake up sort of your inner world, okay? The part of you, see, the 8th house is all about bonding with another person. It's about sacred obligations and contracts we have with other people. Uranus is not. Uranus is about breaking those things. And so when they fall into that 8th house, you'll have a really strong draw to this person. It will feel like a fated or a significant relationship. But at the same time, it's going to feel intense. You're going to feel crazy half the time. Both people, I would even say, but really the house person especially. You're going to feel like this person is trying to rip up this part of you that wants things to be safe and secure, okay? So it can be very exciting and just like irresistible, but also at the same time, it's very extreme. It's a love-hate thing. Either it's on again, off again. It's either I want it or I don't want it. It's either amazing or it freaks me out. Okay, it's all at the same time. So again, look at your birth chart. Look at your partner's birth chart. If you've got someone who has a strongly Uranian or Plutonian birth chart, this is something that you need. It's teaching you about yourself, teaching you about the things you probably do to other people as well. Okay, so. On the shadow side with this one, this can be something okay, so our 8th house also rules like our joint resources, like our money we have with other people. Let's say you marry someone, you have this kind of an aspect with them. Perhaps you guys split up and your resources become, there's a big war over the resources, or there can be sort of it's like a lightning storm. Your money's here and then it's gone kind of a thing. So that can happen as well with this inner aspect. But overall, this is to me a very intense, be prepared, put on all your helmet and all your safety gear because it's going to be a wild ride. Okay, if your Uranus falls into your partner's 9th house, this is the house of wisdom and philosophy and religion and spirituality to a certain extent. It's more like organized religion. Organized, it's like philosophy, systematized or codified and then put into place to describe and explain our existential experiences, okay? Okay, your Uranus falls in this person's house, you're going to cause them to reevaluate their philosophies of life. You're going to cause them to look at life and look at all the big questions, the whys, the hows, the wheres, the whos, and ask them in new ways that they've never asked before. Perhaps this is someone who's religious, you come along and they question their faith. All right, they question their basic beliefs. So it's kind of more of an intellectual inner aspect because the 9th house is one that has to do with wisdom and knowledge. It's not such an emotional shakeup. It's more like you're shaking up their existential view on life. Okay, what is the meaning of life? You will cause them to ask big questions, to re-examine what their approach is to the meaning of life. So this can be a really nice inner aspect between two people, especially if they need a lot, again, of mercurial influence, if they need a lot of sort of intellectual stimulation. This can be a really nice inner aspect. It can be a little tough because it can also be something if you've got someone who's quite religious, let's say your partner, the house person, is quite religious or spiritual, you come along and you don't agree with the dogma, or you don't agree with, if they're sort of orthodox in their views, that can be a conflict, right? It could be something that they're rigidly opposed to changing, and you come along and want to change them on it, and that can feel very uncomfortable to them. And again, that's like challenging their foundations, and so they may not appreciate that. So that could be a problem. Okay, if your Uranus falls in your partner's 10th house, if it's conjunct their MC especially, 10th house is that house of career. It's also the house of the outer world and our status. So let's look at this from a few angles. That Uranian person, you hold space. Not only are you going to look at how this Uranus of yours sort of affects and like energizes this person's 10th house, which would be you might bring a job unexpectedly into your partner's life, or you might bring some sort of status unexpectedly to their life, okay? You could bring something like you could help them see themselves career-wise in a whole new light, all right? But also, they could see you as a Uranian influence, as a Uranian person. So sort of erratic, unpredictable, flaky, crazy, and that could be just how they see you in that 10th house. In their life, they could be worried that other people will see their involvement with you as their involvement with someone who is all those things I just described. So, if this is on the high side, they could see you as someone who's sort of bohemian or like a little hippie or a little like you're a nonconformist, and so it makes them, if that's something they're interested in projecting out into the world, they could appreciate having you in their life, and they will be happy to wave that flag. So you've got to look at their entire chart. If this is someone who's very conventional and conservative, they might not like that. They might not like that about how your influence in their life makes them look to other people. All right. But overall, to me, this is like you're going to bring some excitement and some shakeup to their attitude and their approach to status, their attitude and their approach to their career. You might help them, again, see their own personal genius, help them see where they're at right now is okay, but they should, perhaps they're kind of stuck and they could break off the chains of that conventional job they've been working at and try this new risky, bold move that might be a better fit for them. All right, if your Uranus falls in your partner's 11th house is the Uranian house. It's the Aquarius house, which Uranus is the modern ruler of Aquarius. This house has to do with the collective. It's our groups, the associations we belong to, our friendships, our hopes. It's also, I think of it as the house of science. I think of it as the house of sort of fringe science. So it would be sort of our approach to quantum physics, or, understanding the edges of the universe, trying to come up with some elegant theory that explains and describes the universe in a very simple, with a simple equation. That's like 11th house, okay? Not necessarily an emotional house, okay? This is a house that has to do, it's very cerebral, has to do more with thought, with ideals. When you think of friendship, friendship is not, you care about your friend, yes, but it's not because you get anything emotional out of it necessarily, other than just that fidelity that comes between two people, that just care about each other and want the best for one another, okay? So Uranus in the 11th house is going to enhance that. It's going to enhance the element of friendship between the two people, the desire to be out in the world doing things that are, furthering your personal ideals relative to the collective. It's very humanitarian. There's definitely a strong need for freedom. If your Uranus falls into your partner's 11th house, you're enhancing their personal need for freedom and perhaps helping them try things that they haven't tried before, helping them, if they're interested in charitable causes, you might be someone that really inspires them to go for it, like, you have this idea that you want to take part in, go for it. So there's really this sort of platonic, friendly vibe that happens with Uranus when it falls into your partner's 11th house. Okay. On the shadow side, there can be a little too much freedom. If you're someone who wants a stable, committed relationship, or maybe your partner does, it can be a little harder it can even be just that you feel like friends with this person, or one person it's platonic, it's friend zoned. It's not, especially if you've got other things that indicate lack of sexual heat. It can be a really great relationship for social contact and conversation and friendship, but maybe not so much for the romantic side of things. So take in the whole charts, but there will be a strong element of friendship with this particular house overlay. If your Uranus falls in your partner's 12th house, this is kind of a weird house overlay. I mean, it's a little challenging to describe. So you got to remember, this means that if you and your partner are born within a couple years, a year or two of each other, good chance that their Uranus is also in their 12th house. Okay, think of Uranus as this cosmic sort of, but like cerebral planet. All right, it's in your partner's house of spirituality. It's in their house of the unconscious. It's the part of them that could at times feel a little cuckoo birds, a little crazy, right? That comes out in ways that are unexpected. There can be a little bit of unstable thinking that happens with Uranus in this placement. It also makes somebody somewhat psychic. But so if your Uranus is there, it's emphasizing this. Okay, it's bringing out this unpredictable kind of on again, off again purging of their inner subconscious world. So that can come out like in ways that feel kind of crazy. No, it could also be that you influence their spiritual approach, that you bring sort of a rational, cerebral, cosmic approach to spirituality, or you bring, if they've got a particular spirituality that they're really focused on, perhaps you come along and you shake that up and you bring out, oh, hi, puppy. You bring out them and then the desire to try some new things with their spiritual practice, unconventional, maybe even new agey. Astrology, for example, is very Uranian. Yes, we're talking about psychology and spiritual and soulful matters, but we're using mathematics and we're using geometry and, defining things. Okay, there's a system. So it's like applying that to someone's spirituality. You could, very good chance you could be introducing astrology to this person. That would not be surprising. All right, so anyway, I hope you guys like this. If you have questions, let me know, and let me know what your experiences have been with your partners with Uranus and the house overlays. And remember, Uranus, like I said earlier, Uranus in your birth chart, if you're dating someone who's within a couple of years of your birth, more than likely all the people you date, if they're close to your age, their Uranus will fall in the same place you natally have your Uranus in your chart, and vice versa. So it's like, overall, this is going to be your impression about dating, when it comes to these Uranian influences. If you've got it in the first house, if you've got it in the seventh house, you're going to look at dating and relationship when it comes to Uranian influences through this lens. Okay, so really get to know where your Uranus is placed. If you date people that are close in age to you, there's a good chance they are coming along and they're enhancing your view of Uranus as this unconventional, shake it up, crazy making energy. And so again, relationships are all about the mirror, so they're helping you see yourself even better. All right, thanks for watching. Okay, bye-bye.